Energy and the Environment to order, and I'd like to thank our Sergeant at Arms for being here today, Michael Cabanis, Brian Devon, John Enlow, and Mike Harris. Thank you so much for helping us out today. And we also have some pages that I'd like to welcome. Lydia Allen, sponsored by Senator Craven. Thanks. Lena Byrd, sponsored by Senator Hunt. Walker Coley, he's sponsored by Senator Craven also. Emerson Eulis, sponsored by Senator Galey. Elizabeth Griffin, sponsored by Senator Smith. And Lauren Parsons by Senator Sanderson. Thank you guys for being here with us today. So we have two bills on the calendar for consideration, and they're both PCS, and we will just be for discussion only today. And we will start with House Bill 130, and without objection, the PCS is before the committee, and Senator Newton will be presenting. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Members, Senate Bill, or House Bill 130, the PCS you have before you, addresses two issues. The first comes from exactly the same bill that passed the House, which would, in essence, confirm the prevention against local governments from adopting ordinances that ban natural gas or propane, either the connections or certain appliances that might use those. And we'll come back to that and talk about the wisdom of this particular provision. The second portion of the bill addresses solar decommissioning and financial assurance requirements. This bill from the outset was drafted in conjunction with DEQ to ensure adequate minimum decommissioning requirements are in place across North Carolina with financial assurance metrics to ensure the entity that made the decommissioning promises has the financial wherewithal to meet its obligations. Once we had a good draft in hand, we negotiated with Alex Miller and the industry. We accepted virtually all of their changes, proposed changes to the bill. And we wanted this to be a bill that doesn't hurt the solar industry, but is accepted and actually beneficial to the industry. And I think that's where we're landing on this. It also protects the environment at the time of solar decommissioning. In a prior version of the bill, we had a financial assurance requirement upon the transfer of a solar project to another entity. We have taken that out. So that's a difference from the first time I presented this bill to you. We have taken that provision out, and we can certainly talk about that more if you'd like. But the financial assurance requirement in this bill would only apply to new solar projects, projects that have been significantly expanded, or projects that have been rebuilt, or in the industry jargon, repowered. This bill provides numerous avenues for no-cost or low-cost ways to assure financial assurance is met by the owner prior to the construction of a project. And what we're trying to do here is just ensure protection for the landowners and the environment without unduly burdening the solar industry. And we think we hit a good balance in this bill. So I'm happy to walk through each provision, each section of this bill, or I can stop now and answer any questions you might have. I know of no opposition to the second portion of this bill. I hear through the grapevine there's little opposition to the first portion of the bill.
Thank you, Senator Newton. Are there questions from the committee for Senator Newton? Okay, seeing no questions. I think we may have someone signed up to speak from the public. Alex Miller, if you would come and state your name and who you're representing, and please limit your comments to 2 minutes so we can go to the next lengthy bill.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Alex Miller here representing renewable energy developers across the state. Senator Newton is right. We've negotiated this bill. It is a consensus bill at this point. I just want to thank Senator Newton and his staff other members of the committee that work with us to come to this position. The bill strikes a reasonable balance between doing no harm to the industry, but providing for assurance that the promises made by the industry will be kept, as was always the intent. And I appreciate the committee's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak from the public? If not, this is for discussion only, so we will move to the next bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Newton. House Bill 600, the Regulatory Reform Act of 2023. And again, this is a PCS, so without objection, the PCS is before the committee for discussion only. And I think we have 3 handling this bill, so y'all have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It takes 3 to handle reg reform. I want to thank all of y'all for being here this morning, being willing to listen to this bill. It's like any other reg reform bill. I think I've been involved in the last 5 that we've had, and it starts out like a turtle and ends up like a rabbit. And so this one is no different. I do want to take bill sponsor prerogative for just a second and say that if you're here as a committee member or if you're in the audience and want something that you have contacted myself or any of my co-chairs or our staff or Jenny about, and it's not in this bill, we're going to give you till 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon to remind us, because this thing has been wild over the last week. A lot of things coming, a lot of things going. When you take 2 different reg reform bills and put them together, that always brings its own special circumstances. So anyway, I want to thank Kyle and Jennifer, especially Chris and Aaron, for their help. We took bets this morning. We had a meeting at 8:30. We took bets whether Kyle would have any hair left or not and what color it would be. And I missed it on both occasions. So I said he'd have less hair and it would be a lot grayer. But anyway, thank you. And my 2 co-chairs, Senator Johnson and Senator Woodard. We're going to kind of break this down this morning. This bill has 30 sections in it. Each one of us are going to take 8 or 9 or 10 of them. We've kind of paired them up according to what our areas of interest is. And so Senator Woodard is going to start. Now we're going to be, they're not in numerical numbers, so we're going to be switching around, but he will tell you what section that he's talking about when we do it. Senator Woodard.
Thank you, Chairman Sanderson, and I too want to appreciate my co-sponsors and our incredible staff, Jenny, Jennifer, Kyle, for working with us on this, and appreciate a lot of the feedback that we received. Again, to remind you, we're going to skip around in the bill sections that we may have worked on and had particular interest in. So beginning with sections 1, 2, and 4, these have all been revised due to concerns since they were discussed in the committee on May 2nd due to concerns raised by DEQ. We've worked very closely with DEQ as well as the Home Builders Association to develop provisions that both of those organizations support, and we feel like we've got good language compromise on these 3 sections. Section 1 allows developers to treat the increase in stormwater resulting from the net increase in built-upon areas in order to exceed the allowable density limit under applicable watershed rules. Section 2 specifies the developer's impervious surface area of development does not include the portion of the project that is within the DOT or municipal rights-of-way, and that increased stormwater controls may only be required for the amount of impervious surface that exceeds the amount that existed prior to redevelopment. It also allows a redevelopment project to exceed the allowable density limit when the net increase in stormwater after redevelopment is treated. And finally, it provides more stormwater permitting operations to address backlogs. Coastal area applicants have the choice to submit an application to DEQ's Washington or Wilmington offices, and cities and counties with delegated permitting authority may enter into joint permitting agreements to balance their workloads. Section 4 of the bill requires the EMC to undertake rulemaking to allow for an exemption for public linear transportation project from the developer's requirements under Section 15A NACO2H.1001 rules. Section 15 is the wastewater relief provisions in Senate Bill 673 that the Senate passed unanimously. They have the full support of DEQ, and Senator Newton added these as a backup in case the House decides not to consider Senate Bill 673, a good piece of common sense legislation. I just wanted to throw that in, Senator Newton. Section 16 prohibits the disposal of lithium-ion batteries in any landfill in the state because they are a fire hazard, and it prohibits the disposal of solar panels in unlined landfills in the state to prevent the leaching of toxic metals that are contained in the panels into the surrounding soil and water. At the request of DEQ, we have added a requirement that all batteries and solar panels will meet the definition of hazardous waste needed to comply with hazardous waste requirements for disposal and recycling as applicable. Section 17 clarifies that a prospective developer may perform an investigation of a brownfields property without prior DEQ approval. Per the request of DEQ, this prohibits the department from placing restrictions on the use of a brownfields property that is more stringent than federal law has been removed until we study the implications of that further. And finally, Section 23 is the system development fee clarifications that were contained in Senate Bill 673. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield to you or Senator Johnson. You're next, okay.
Okay, I'm going to start with Section 3 of the bill. Section 3 requires municipalities to adjust fees to account for the stormwater control measures when establishing fees and not charge a periodic fee when all of the stormwater is retained on the owner's own property. Section 5 is a House provision that resolves an issue between Iredell and Rowan counties and is supported by county commissioners and senators in Senators Ford and Sawyer's district. It authorizes Iredell County and the town of Mooresville to develop another 10% of the land area outside of the critical areas up. Section 6 has been revised from voluntary reporting to phased-in mandatory reporting of certain fish harvest, including red drum, flounder, spotted trout, striped bass, and weakfish, caught by recreational and commercial fishermen. A person who does not report receives a verbal warning the first year, a written warning the second year, and a fine of $25 beginning December 1st, 2026. A reporting app similar to the one being developed for the Wildlife Resources Commission and funded in the Senate version of the budget will be the reporting vehicle. Section 9 requires DEQ to issue or deny a permit to dredge in a U.S. Coast Guard marked navigational channel within 30 to 60 days after a complete application is filed. And let me move back just a minute to the mandatory reporting. One of the hardest things that we have in managing fisheries in the state of North Carolina is to have reliable data that we can use to make decisions of when a species is in danger, when it's not, when it has recovered, when it's not. The limits, everything that fishermen do, commercial and recreational, depend on this data. And the sources of our data have little by little been drying up over the years. We have very limited. So we are, the wildlife, as I said, is getting ready to launch a reporting vehicle app July 1st. They followed a application that South Carolina had. South Carolina really messed theirs up, but North Carolina has all of their ducks in a row, and it's going to be a great vehicle. We are going to be the first state on the East Coast and probably in the nation to try and in place put a reporting app on social media and other places so that fishermen can report their catch. We would love to do it voluntarily, but we know at some point that it's going to have to be required. A lot of this is going to depend on our education to the fishermen, both commercial and recreational, so that they will know that this is the way that their seasons are going to be determined, that their quotas are going to be determined, that size is going to be determined, And we're really hoping that they will begin to respond to this so that Division of Marine Fisheries will have the data that it needs to make good decisions. Section 7 shortens the period of time that DEQ has to act upon a dredging project in U.S. Coast Guard marked navigational channels from 75 days to 30 days, with an option for DEQ to extend that deadline by one additional 30 days. One of the things that, as far as navigation is concerned, is the only thing that overrules both DEQ and the federal government is hazards in our navigational waters. When that takes place, then all else has gone out the window. All other controls are mute, and those navigational concerns have to be taken care of. Section 8 prohibits the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers from receiving shallow draft dredging grants and prohibits DEQ from giving the Corps monies from this fund. As you know, several years ago, we set this fund up. It's totally funded by gas tax and by fishery fees on license. We do not like the idea that the Corps of Engineers has access to this without following the same rules that any other entity would have to follow. A local government has to join with this group in order to receive these funds, and we don't think that the Corps of Engineers should be able to come in and write their own checks anytime they want to. A lot of this has to do with spoils when they're dredging, and a lot of it sometimes is even on the Virginia, South Carolina. A lot of it is in the intercoastal waterway. And so this money was designed and has been collected to help federal navigated channels in North Carolina and to keep our waterways open. And so we feel like that's where the money should go. Section 9 requires polystyrene flotation devices that are sold and used in coastal counties be encapsulated beginning January 1st, 2025. A lot of folks, because of the cost, are using unencapsulated styrofoam, and what happens is after about a year or two it begins to break down, and within 3 or 4 years it's totally disintegrated, and all of that is going into our waters. And so we're going to be requiring in 2025 that be encapsulated so that it does not break down in the building of docks, in any kind of commercial fishing or recreational fishermen that uses styrofoam. Section 10 is the new section that requires the Division of Coastal Management to have written guidelines, policies, and procedures on its website that directly reference the enabling rule or statute that they are putting in place. Section 11 is a new section that revises the Neuse River Basin TMDL transport factor to the permitted discharge and the nutrient offset credits specified in the 1999 Phase 1 TMDL, and requires validation of the modeling prior to its use in determining new transport zone and delivery factors. Section 12 is a new section that limits the scope of what EMC DEQ consider when denying a permit for an animal operation to what is required by statute. Section 13 is a House provision that prohibits local governments from selling nutrient offset credits to third parties. We revised the House's version to make it clear that units of government could sell to one another. Section 14 is a House provision also that makes a technical correction, changing municipalities to unit of local government so that now neither a city nor a county can prevent the use of DEQ-approved off-site wastewater by ordinance. Sections 18 and 19 make it easier to meet riparian buffer rules and flood plan requirements when building or expanding an airport. And I can tell you now before you start guessing which airport this is, it's RDU. Section 17 modifies the definition of airport to include all areas used or suitable for use as borrowed or staging area. And Section 19 requires the Department of Public Safety to grant a permit for the use of eligible flood hazard areas for which the airport authority has demonstrated the project will not result in any increase in flood levels within the community. This is required because, and not a lot of people know this, I didn't, that Raleigh-Durham International Airport is not in the county jurisdiction or a municipality jurisdiction. It's in its own jurisdiction, and so they can't come to the city and ask for this or anything like that. And finally, Section 28 restores the 2009 building code standards for piers and docks constructed in estuarine waters. How you say that?
Madam Chair,
Yeah, that's good.
is the one we're calling the version that we're getting from the website, is that what we're talking from this morning?
Probably, unless you, I'm not sure that the PCS was on the website this morning.
Okay.
This is a little different.
That's what was throwing me off. And so, do we
Okay.
have a hard copy of what we're talking about?
We can get you one. We didn't have any available.
Pardon? Or I mean, I don't have a problem with it being electronic, but I'm not able to follow along.
Okay.
I'm not being critical in
Connie,
any way,
you have-
shape, manner, or form. We're sitting back here scratching our head because we couldn't keep up.
Okay, I think Kyle has the ability to send that out to all members, do you?
Yeah, I can recirculate that to everyone's email. And I do want to point out that H600 committee substitute is available on the committee website under documents, and then May 31, 2023. And it is the 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5th item on the list. But I'll go ahead and circulate that, so it should hit your email inbox here in just a minute.
So it has been posted on our website. It may not be out for the general public yet. And just as an way of explanation on the last one that I said about the building code standards for piers and docks. A lot of homeowners have been building piers and docks in coastal waters for the last, I don't know how many years. And they're using cheaper and cheaper and cheaper material to build these docks because they're really not inspected after you get an initial permit from Corps of Engineers. There's really no other inspection that takes place. And so what's happening is in the storms, these docks are not withstanding any kind of off force from the winds or water or tide. These docks and piers are crumbling and they become waste in our waterways, and they're really beginning to create a problem. I've seen after storms in my area that you could ride up and down the waterway or the coastline, and within an hour or two you could salvage enough material to rebuild another dock. And so it's getting really, so we're going back to the 2009 standards that pertain to docks and piers, so that at least we would have the ability to inspect, and at least we would be able to require some kind of foundational support that would say that these docks and piers can withstand certain elements. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to our last presenter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I will continue with this to finalize this very simple bill that we have before us here today. Section 20 is a House provision that allows associations to charge for providing water and sewer service. Section 21 increases the minimum bond required for a water sewer franchise from $10,000 to $25,000 and allows the Utility Commission to use the bond to support an emergency operator's work to alleviate a system emergency. Section 22 is a technical fix for parking space size and continuation of Section 13. Increased threshold for fire apparatus access roads from SL 2022-11, which prevented the Building Code Council from requiring 2 or more fire apparatus access roads in developments with less than 101 or 2 family dwelling units. Some local governments have not followed suit. Changing the fire apparatus access road for entrances and developments for 1 or 2 family dwellings for residential subdivision clarifies the intention of the provision. Section number 24, a House provision that exempts minor league baseball players employed under a collective bargaining agreement from state minimum wage, overtime, and records keeping requirements. Section 25 requires medical providers retain medical records for a minimum of 10 years, but this section does not apply to pharmacy or veterinary practice, which have 3-year record-keeping requirements. Section 26 is a House provision. It codifies existing stroke center designations and adds a thrombectomy-capable stroke center designation. Section 27 is a House provision that revises the homeschool cooperative exemption to allow cooperative arrangements to occur in a location outside the home of one of the participants. Section 29 disapproves certain DOA good faith efforts rules that place an unintended burden on the Department of Treasury and other departments within the state. Section 30 explains the definition of emergency to include a disruption in the supply chain that creates a significant threat to a local government's ability to provide essential services such as electricity and water, and relaxes the contracting requirements during emergencies to enable local governments to be able to purchase the essential equipment and supplies to maintain these services. Section 31 allows a nonprofit to increase the value of a real estate prize offered in a lottery from $500,000 to $2.5 million. Section 32 is a House provision that exempts inflatables from the definition of an amusement ride so that operators will no longer have to have one person dedicated to each inflatable. Section 33 stops money from 911 service charges from going back to the telecommunication service providers. Madam Chair, I think that's it, and we would stand for any questions.
Thank you all for that very thorough presentation of the bill, and at this time, we'll take questions from the committee.
Madam Chair, I have a question for Senator Johnson.
Oh, Lord.
Okay, Senator Woodard.
Senator Johnson, can you explain a thrombectomy?
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Senator Woodard. No, I cannot. I did pretty good pronouncing it, though, didn't I?
I was good.
Good job. Do we need staff to
No,
do that?
I know what thrombectomy is. I didn't know Johnson did.
I think it's brain removal.
Senator Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question to direct to staff or to Senator Sanderson about docks and estuaries or estuarine waters. And we're going back to the 2009 standard. But I know in some of the houses in our areas that have docks that may or may not have been built since 2009, but if those docks, you can't change anything about them other than repairs. Will this allow those docks to be demolished and replaced on the same footprint with 2009 materials and what have you, or are you just SOL if they get washed out if they were built since 2009 and cannot be replaced?
Senator Sanderson.
Senator Raven, I'll let Kyle answer that question, but I think it's going to, just like any other dock, that if it's destroyed, it can be rebuilt in the same footprint as long as it's not any wider, any longer, any higher. It has to go back to the same standards. And we are also not including anything that's already in the water. Build back would be acceptable to this, but we're also given enough time that anything that's currently under construction would be able to finish before this law comes into effect.
Okay. May I follow up, please?
Yes.
I guess my real question is that if a person has an existing dock that was built after 2009 or after the moratorium, because you cannot in some places get one now, will that person be able to demolish that, not nature, but personally demolish that and replace it with a better dock? That's what I'm saying with materials and what have you. Because right now you can't, unless Mother Nature takes it out. You can't replace it.
That's a new twist in this whole thing. I hadn't heard that before.
Just
but
a question.
it's something we need to
You and I would think about it, but
yeah, Kyle, I don't know if you have an answer to that, or Jennifer, whether or not they could do that just to bring it up to standards.
yeah.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Rabin, we'll confirm with our building code experts on staff, but so I think the people that have existing docks, and this would be the standard kind of building code operation, those would be grandfathered under the standards that they were constructed. And then if they chose to upgrade their dock, then they would be subject to the new 2000, well, bringing back the 2009 standards.
But to answer your question, I think they would be able, we'll check that, but I think they would be able to destroy it themselves and build it back to standard.
That would be a help, to the environment and to the dock owners.
It would.
Other questions? Senator McGinnis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In section 16 regarding lithium-ion batteries. Anybody know anything about that one?
Senator Woodard?
I know more about thrombectomies, but I'll be glad to try.
My question, Senator Woodard, is I've been reading a significant amount of information lately about the reclamation of these lithium-ion batteries to the effect that 95% of the rare earth minerals and metals that are in those batteries are recoverable. Do we do anything in this particular piece of legislation to incentivize someone to do that kind of business here in North Carolina versus it going to some other place in the country?
I'm not aware that we are doing anything about it. We don't in this bill, but I'd love to work with you. If you think you've got an idea how we can do that, let's work on that. That's a good piece of business that maybe we could work on together.
Absolutely, and since we're going to become a hub, Madam Chair, of manufacturing of these batteries, it would seem reasonable that we would also get into the reclamation business of that. Again, it would cut significantly the amount of rare earth minerals that have to come from China. Thank you very much.
Just to add, I think our intent in Section 16 of this bill is to address the immediate concern, but I appreciate you bringing that recommendation. Love to work on it with you. Let's do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Woodard. Other questions from the committee? We have one person signed up to speak on the bill. So if you would, Mr. Pearson or Mrs. Pearson, sorry. State your name and who you represent.
Hi, I'm Brooks Rainey Pearson. I am with the Southern Environmental Law Center. There's a lot I disagree with on policy here. Several provisions would harm water quality. But setting that aside for now in the interest of time, there are two provisions in this bill that are simply illegal and will drag the state into litigation. Both are in Section 12. The permit modification grandfathering provision and the prohibition on DEQ adding limits and conditions on permits. This will prevent DEQ from complying with federal law, including the Clean Water Act and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. I urge you to please remove that section from the bill.
Anyone else wish to speak? If not, Senator Sanderson would like to make some closing comments, I believe.
And to Senator McInnes's question, one of the things that concerned us almost as much as the heavy elements that are contained in these batteries and storing them in a place where they're going to be safe is the fire hazard that they create wherever they are. And so that's why we're doing it. But we better get ready. We've had a warning, and it is coming our way. Again, I want to remind you, if any member of this committee has previously submitted a request to us for entrance into the reg reform bill, and it's not in this particular version, or any member of the audience that has done the same, to 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, please re-refer, please give us the thing, and we will make sure that we have it in there before we hear this bill again, I think probably Tuesday.
Thank you, Senator Sanderson. Having completed all of our business, this meeting is adjourned.